This is the Catch a Break podcast, the insider's guide to breaking into and navigating the entertainment industry. You can find us at catchabreakpodcast.com and all the social media at catchabreakpod, as well as all the podcast places. I'm Julie Harris Oliver, formerly Julie Harris Walker. Now, as we work on producing season 4 of Catch a Break, which is going to be very special and cool, and you will just have to trust me on that since we are not ready to spoil it, I wanted to share with you a couple of really special interviews. Both are with the leadership of the Women's Production Society. The WPS is an organization of physical production executives across the industry. It started as a small cocktail party and has since grown to more than 100 members and is a powerful force of change within the industry with the purpose to fulfill their mission statement, to promote the hiring of women in leadership roles in film, television, and new media. This first interview is with the founding members Dana Belcastro and Debra Bergman. Both came up as producers and are now both executives. To get their full stories, I will refer you back to episodes 108 and 109 of the Other 50% podcast, where we do a deep dive into both of their herstories. And you can find that at theother50%.com, all spelled out in letters. In today's episode, they walk us through the origin of the Women's Production Society and what they are looking to do next as they hand the reins over to the next leadership of the group. Here, have a listen. I'm here with Dana Belcastro.
Hello, everybody.
And Debra Bergman.
Hello, everybody.
Of the Women's Production Society. All right, now you know everybody's voices. Now, I have asked you your entire life stories, which we put on the Other 50% podcast, so we don't need to do that again now.
God.
Everyone should go over there and listen to those interviews, because I think we did about 50 hours, lots of coffee, and had the best time in the world.
Indeed.
But let's talk about the Women's Production Society. Before we get there, where are you working right now?
I'm working at Apple, ATV Plus, doing feature films for Tim Cook and all his friends.
And Debra, are you also working at Apple?
I am. I'm working at Apple, ATV Plus on the TV series High Inside.
It's weird how your careers circle each other.
It is interesting, actually. We talk about that a lot. We've always been kind of in sync in a strange way, so we can support each other in very meaningful ways.
Now we can see if we can explode in the tech universe at Apple.
We'll see.
As powerful women do support each other. So let's talk about the Women's Production Society. Let's start at the very beginning. Where did the idea come from?
A conversation. Actually, I started at a major studio in features back in 2005, and it was very male. All the production execs and all the executives throughout multiple divisions were men. And I was the only token female executive. And I was on the phone with Dana and we were chit-chatting and I had started the job. I was 6 months into it and I was like, how the heck am I going to navigate these male waters? I went from producing in the field where there was really no difference of gender to a corporate environment where it was very obvious that I was the female in the room. And on the phone with my cohort, Miss Dana Belcastro, and sitting there saying, I don't know how I'm going to be able to do this.
What did it look like?
White men.
But when you say it was the differences were, you could feel it in the room, what did that look like?
It looked like you're the one who's supposed to bring the pad into the room and take the notes. Mm-hmm. You're the one that when someone
Office
says
housekeeping,
when people swear, they look at you. Oops. they dropped an F-bomb in front of the woman in the room. It looked like
the moral
lots of pontification of the men, and you're just sitting there and you just want to cut through the fat and get the answers done and move on to the next indicated action.
Yeah.
And you're really just being kept a certain, way. It was a bunch of male executives, one female exec, and all the support staff were predominantly female, like secretaries. So it was very different. It felt very 1950s.
Like hard to get your voice heard.
Hard to get your voice heard, yes, because you had a lot of parroting going on where you would say something and 10 minutes later the male would repeat it. So
except louder.
And with a lot of high fives. And yes, a lot of high fives.
A lot of high fives. Yeah.
Yes. And so we were chit-chatting and she was feeling the same.
No, I really wasn't, because I was at a mini major and there were other female execs. And I was actually treated with a lot of respect at that company. But I heard her because I understood, of course, what she was talking about. And I'd been an executive for a little while longer than she had. I'd started in 1999. So I heard what she was saying, though, and understood and sympathized. And we were talking about it, and we were just talking like, are there any other female execs?
Who are the female production execs at the major studios? And then we sat down and we just put our brains together and said, who do we know? And we literally went through Warner Brothers, Sony, Paramount, Fox, DreamWorks or Amblin at the time. And then we knew some of the folks at HBO and Warner's. And we just literally...
But it was literally a handful of women.
Yeah.
It was, like 5 people doing it at that level.
At that time.
So then did you call them up and
we
say...
just literally, we knew some of them, and then we just started calling. We divided and conquered, and we just co-called a couple of them, and we said, we're getting together at Luke's. That, I think it was the fall of 2006.
Okay. Yeah, one booth. We all fit in one booth.
Yep. There were 7 of us.
Yeah, we think it was 7. We were trying to remember.
7.
It was like 7 of us.
And
everybody was amazing. Like, everybody was so smart and so cool, and we had such a good time, like, just talking about our experience. So, after that, we decided, and we didn't have any real goal in mind, but we just wanted to get together with these women again because they were all so cool and fun and smart.
Yeah.
And like-minded, A-type personalities, get things done, all thought a similar way.
And was everyone having the same experience at work?
Oh, yeah.
More or less, yeah. Sure.
More or less. Not as bad. I think mine was
Yours was,
extreme.
Egregious.
Mine was one of the biggest extremes, I think, in the business at the time. Although there were some places that we couldn't even get a female exec. I think at the time Universal didn't even have a female executive in physical production.
No, I think they did.
They didn't. Right. So there were some studios that were not represented because there were no female execs at VP or higher.
After Whitney left, Disney didn't have one for a long
Disney
time.
Disney didn't have one.
Yeah. And then when I was at Fox, I was the only female. Yeah. That was absolutely the token.
And this is well into the 2000s.
I'm talking about like 2018 for Fox.
Yeah.
Amazing.
But in 2006, we had our first dinner. There were 7 of us at Luke's in West Hollywood. We all threw down our credit cards. It was a beautiful experience. And then from there, we said, we got to do it again. There were some people that didn't make it. We kept it specifically for film. We both were motion picture film. I think HBO was part of it.
HBO and then, whoever else we could think of that were doing it at a certain level. But again, it stayed steady at between like 15 and 20 for a very, very long time. Like we had a great dinner at the back room at Cabrera. We had a great dinner at Ago. Like actually the big challenge was finding the room.
Finding the room. We started
room for enough of us because it started getting bigger.
Like the best dinner club.
Oh my God, it was so fun. It was amazing. And then Debra started in TV.
And then in 2014, I started in television. And then I met some female production execs that were just our kind of gals. There were like 3 of them. One was at ABC, one was at CBS, and the other one was at Stars. And I was like, oh my God, I called Dana. I said, there's this whole other arena of female production execs in television. In fact, there were probably more because they had bigger departments then, and there was a lot more action going on in TV.
You could move a lot easier in TV than you could in features. Yeah.
And so I said, we got to let them in, and we did. And then we doubled immediately.
Yeah, almost immediately. Yeah.
In 2014, we just started doubling the type of people that would join the group, and they were, some of them
were amazing.
They were amazing. Some were doers like us. Some that were the only woman, the token, thoroughbred at their company, as the hire, and they were just dealing with the same, keep you down, keep your thoughts down kind of methodology.
So again, it was all about supporting each other and expanding our view of what the business was like. And, it didn't exist before that. It's a very competitive business. So, we were actually taking a different perspective. We were going to support each other and help each other rise up. And I'll jump ahead a little bit, but when we decided to kind of make it a little bit more organized, Kristen came up with our mission statement, right? Yeah. To promote women in positions of leadership
and TV media.
Yes.
But wait, before you jump to that, at the time it was we were also meeting a little bit more regularly. So in 2014, we were trying to do 4 times a year, 3 to 4 times a year.
Right.
We were meeting, but we were doing more hosting, like companies would host, like HBO would host.
Right. Paramount
host a couple of times when
Fox
I was there.
Would host, yeah.
Fox would host. Yeah. And it was not only about support, it became a huge resource because now we were never sharing hey, do you know a good, refi broker? It was more like, hey, can you recommend this production service company? Or can you recommend, a place to, a producer that's worked in this territory? It became resourceful back then when we opened it up to television.
And also if we knew open positions. If we knew, if somebody's looking for an executive, that started that idea, that kind of support that we could, promote women into those positions. Whereas before it was very closed, because the people who were making the decisions were men.
The other thing that was going on at the time in 2006 to 2013, there was a thing in the feature space called the Grog and Chowder, which was a gathering that would happen every 6 weeks. And I was going to that, and it was with the major studios. And literally I would be the only woman in a room full of men. Sometimes it would be me and maybe Whitney Green from Disney. It depends on who was invited, but it was very male, and you felt it in the room. And cut to, we basically created our own female grog, and it was, the only requirement was to be a woman, VP level or above, at the time, mostly in features. And so we started to do this kind of similar methodology. We would meet at dinner. We would talk about things we're going through in the workplace, about our shows. And then, there were times when we would talk about personal things going on in our lives. And we would share like joys and sadnesses, triumphants and tragedies. And we would just kind of start to share this as a community of
we built
female
a community,
execs.
actually.
Basically, something I always looked forward to every few weeks when we would have it, like just sitting down with these women and just like-minded folk and just talking under the cone of silence, like just with this understanding.
So really the opposite of how people talk about women in business.
Oh, exactly.
Backstabbing catty bitches.
Completely the
Well,
opposite.
that idea that you could only have one woman in the room, right? That was created by whatever, we absolutely turned that over on its head. And it was never a real thing for any of us anyway. I mean, it was some kind of bizarro idea that, was out in the ether that I think did drive a lot of women crazy. But for us, it was always clear that even before we were doing the WPS, there was that girls' night out thing that Dara and Christine and I did. We'd meet for drinks like every 6
film
weeks or
finance,
something.
the bond company would pay for it.
Yeah. So there was always a sense of, because there were so few of us, and when you'd see one, you'd be like, oh my God, help me. So the WPS just kind of codified it and just kind of standardized a lot of it. And because, again, it was growing so fast, we had to kind of create an idea that, VP and above, so that it could be effective.
Yeah, so we can be effective.
But we did create the WPS Lite too, which is for, directors, coordinators.
Later on, we got a little bit more mobilized.
So for women who are just, still, who are still coming up.
Yeah, and the other thing I want to say is these type of women, we amplify the success of women.
Yeah.
We pay forward for women. We supported each other. It was never the cattiness. It was never really catty. And I think it says a lot about the kind of A-type personality of women we are as a collective. So to have groups of women around each other all the time in these moments, it's magnificent, actually, if you think about it, how we've grown just as a group and an organization, and how we're not catty. We don't gossip. We really are constantly moving forward in the forward direction, constantly supporting each other, constantly amplifying. And that speaks volumes as women in general.
Yeah. And to see how all these women's careers have grown.
Yes.
You were all now running Hollywood.
Well, anyway, yes. And there's a historical piece of it.
It's been helpful.
So then back in 2014, TV execs came in. We started blowing up.
Streaming. Started, coming into it. So, before we knew it, we had gone from 15 people to 110. So there was this moment, I remember, because I had to pull over. I was driving in Hollywood and I had to pull over because I was headed in the hills, and I had to pull over so I could keep talking to you. And we were like, what do we do? We can't have dinner anymore. We can't have drinks anymore. This is too much. It's too big. What do we do? And we
were getting feedback from some of the originals that were like, this is becoming too big. And
it was getting unwieldy.
It was, the intimacy of what we were doing was, it's just too much. There's all these new people coming in and
thousands of emails.
And then
So then it had to become an organization.
It did. So we decided to embrace it, because there was a minute, literally a split second, we were like, well, maybe we have to limit it, or maybe we have to. And then we thought, no. Well, this is an incredible resource.
Yeah.
All that brain power, all that firepower in one room. So we decided to, Debra was like, well, let's have a breakfast.
Let's have a breakfast. Let's have an agenda. Yeah. Let's make it quarterly. Let's affect change in Hollywood. It's like a force of nature.
And our timing was perfect.
We were force now. It was not the 8 of us at Luke's in West Hollywood. It was 100 plus female execs at multiple streaming networks, studios. Production companies all over the place. And it really, if you were ever going to affect change in the industry, the time was now.
Yeah.
And it didn't hurt that certain things were going on in the culture within Hollywood, as far as really spotlighting women in positions of leadership.
Okay, so you decided this was a thing.
I think we should talk about how we named it, because that was part of the thing.
So I think prior to 2017, prior to this moment in time where we actually hosted a breakfast and made it quarterly, Kristen, or Scooby, decided that we needed to brand it, basically, come up with a name, put together a website. She was really looking ahead in the future. She took us ahead out of this like moment of time where we were just gathering and supporting into like, we really need to brand it and come up with a name. And so we
had a breakfast at Century City, and there were about 10 of us, and we ran through a ton of different possibilities. And I remember Melissa Harper was pushing very hard. She liked the Women's Production Society. I did not. Debra did.
Debra, I think I coined it. Close to it.
Anyway,
okay,
we had a lot of versions. I was a little resistant to making it official. I kind of liked it a little loosey-goosey. Like, I didn't want anybody to feel that they had to, there was a barrier to entrance. I liked the idea that there was a kind of looseness to the interaction, because I worried that if it was more formalized, it would kind of kill some of the spontaneity and kill some of the fun.
So you didn't want to name it at all? Or you
I didn't want to name it at all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I wanted to just affect change.
And everybody else wanted to name it. I was in the minority.
So you lost that fight.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Hands down. Because I was wrong.
In a loving way. She lost it in a loving way. And we were like looking ahead.
Yeah.
So then cut to 2017.
Commitment.
Our first official meeting, WPS, Paramount Studios. Mm-hmm. I hosted it. We had, 42 girls.
We had such an amazing response. Like, we didn't know who would show up. Like a breakfast. Oh my God. Like, it's a huge hassle. Everybody's incredibly busy. And it was different. It was a shift, because before it was like drinks and snacks, right? It was way more social. And now all of a sudden we're going to like make it a real thing.
It's getting serious.
And like 45 people showed up, and they were loaded for bear. They could not wait to get into it. We were so amazed. We were really, really
we had like an agenda.
What was on that first agenda?
Well, the mission statement,
which is to promote the hiring of women for leadership roles in film and television production, which Kristen Karstruby
and new media.
Well, now it's new media, yeah. And we came up with a little kind of logo that Kristen also created, and then later we had some art directors that I found.
But the logo was so interesting because we were trying to affect change, and we worked with the AMPTP, and so Dana and I and a couple other executive would go to the AMPTP and sit with them in Studio City to try to affect change with the Directors Guild of America. And so our first logo photograph was a picture of our purses at AMPTP negotiating table. That's like industry wide, where all the big negotiations take place within Hollywood with all the unions and et cetera. So that kind of was a huge stamp of where we were headed.
Emblematic.
Yes. Exactly where we were heading. So we had the breakfast, people showed up. We had this agenda. It was great. We were starting to really solidify as a collective.
Well, a lot of it was, that first meeting was to take a poll with everybody to see what their interests were. You know, like, where are you seeing deficits? Where are you seeing problems? How can we be effective? So we had a lot of conversations about, like, you know, what were the outstanding issues that we could be effective about? Because we wanted to be really clear that anything we tackled, we'd be able to succeed. We want to set concrete goals because we're production people, and we wanted to be able to actually get it done.
Yeah.
So
I think that's what's so amazing is I was lucky enough to go to one of those meetings. And I tell you, when the 3-page agenda came out, I was blown away, because you weren't just admiring the problem, which we love to do so much. You were actually, these are the things that we're going to change, and this is how we're going to do it.
Well, it's awareness, and then noting it, and then taking actions to achieve it. Yeah. And we were doing achievable actions. We were doing things as a collective that we knew we could collectively as a group, because some of us in our own pods and our own companies were doing it ourselves or trying to do it. And the minute you bring on a whole nother gaggle of people that are doing it with you, it just pushes it along a lot quickly, because you can sit there and say, well, Netflix is doing it, and HBO is doing it, and Universal's doing it, Sony's doing it. Like, now we're doing it too. Like, so you have like this group of people behind you that are pushing it through. It's the same thing of having a big, huge support staff pushing you along.
Can we talk about what some of those things were?
Right. So it was about awareness, creating awareness in the community about what we do and how we do it. And part of the global conversation, the general conversation that was taking place in Hollywood, was about the dearth of females in leadership positions. Yeah. And, we know from long, hard experience that there were very few women on set. Most of those jobs, union jobs, were taken by, white men. And that extended in post visual effects and music as well. So that was kind of the goal to get, because, and I keep saying this, everybody's talking about directors and DPs. There's only one director and one DP on a movie or TV show. And not everybody can do that job, but anybody can do craft service, right? There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of jobs on set, plus post, plus visual effects. You're talking about thousands of jobs. So, and music, forget about it.
Tech scouts were very male, and we had grew up in tech scouts, as our jobs, as producers and production managers and supervisors. We had been the only woman and maybe the staple set decorator. that would be on these big tech scouts, which could have anywhere from 50 to 100 people on it. And those were predominantly heads of department within a show, TV or feature.
Yeah.
And that was a huge telltale to kind of show you were making or what was really going on behind the camera, because you had all these first position heads of department or keys that were male. And so our, objective too is to change what a tech scout looked like, and how you have to do it is start from the top down. So if you can hire slowly and take a pause in the hiring, which is something I've been coined for throughout the industry. Take a pause in the hiring. Don't go with the usual suspects. Don't go with who the agents serve you up, and try to find the diamond in the rough. Try to look under that rock unturned and see that person that might not be ready to step up, but push that person along to step up. And what we focused on doing was finding more women in these jobs that we could support, because when I was at my former studio, I saw men get these great opportunities to direct features that they had no mind directing, but were given the opportunity to direct, or DPs that had no mind shooting a huge action, visual effects heavy show. They never did it before, but were given the opportunity. So we wanted to emulate that and give women the same opportunity that men were being given for decades in Hollywood. And we could do that when you have women in these huge leadership positions throughout the industry that could support you, that you want to hire that person that might not have stepped up as a line producer, but has been a strong UPM for a really long time. And then you can hear from your counterpart who worked with that person and say, yes, let's give that person a shot. And then we could push it through.
Let's talk about the data for a minute, because you're talking about how it plays out. It said men are hired on their potential, women are hired on their accomplishments. And then when you flip it and say, okay, we're going to start hiring women on their potential, then the backlash is, oh, that's so risky. You're introducing risk into my thing. That's so terrible, without acknowledging the risk and chance people have taken on white men for no particular reason.
That's right. But because we were starting to become, we were starting to fill those chairs, we were able to take those risks without really fear of repercussion. And it took us a while to train ourselves out of that, because we'd come up through the industry being afraid of taking those risks.
And to support each other. So
well, exactly.
If Dana had worked with a UPM and I was considering that UPM for a show, she would back me on that. Like, she would we would really kind of vet the person together on seeing whether or not this person we were willing to go to bat for, because we have to deal with so much backslash. We have to go and basically shift the culture slightly, that they give that woman the same opportunity that man was given a year earlier.
Well, I think we helped create an atmosphere where women were able to take those risks, because not only were we all rising up together, but we were all in it together. There was this group of women who had your back if you took that shot. Whereas before, you were completely on your
isolated, you were on your own island, all by
swimming
yourself.
with the sharks.
Yep.
So I think that's really worked. I think that we're all kind of in a position, I certainly am, where I will take that chance. I don't really care anymore. I'm going to do it because I think it's the right thing to do, and I know it'll work. And part of that too is creating an atmosphere where whoever you take that chance on, you have to create a situation for them where they succeed. You can't just throw them in the.
That was my next question, because you can put the woman on set.
Yeah, but then you've got to make sure
you got to make sure the environment is not going to have organ rejection.
Yep. You have to support them, which we did, and we could do that. We had the
more women you inject into the
we had more of the force behind us of this WPS group that could support those type of hirings. And then we started to create our own lists, because we were also sick and tired of our colleagues saying, well, I can't find a woman in that job. I can't find it. They don't exist.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we just, because our membership was getting so big, we started to create our own lists. And we had the WPS master list of all the HODs.
Well, I have the agenda here. Shall I read you just quickly what the agenda items are?
Yes, please. For the record, Dana has showed up with 2 3-ring notebooks of the history of the group.
Okay, so this is an agenda from March 15th, 2018. And I'll quickly go through. Our new business was, we had come up, Debra actually had come up with the idea to do a PSA that would promote women doing below the line jobs on crew.
The awareness campaign.
Yes, and we had envisioned doing a series of them, and it was about because nobody really knows what we do, right? Mm-hmm. So anyway, we were raising money, we were creating a production plan for it, so we were working on the PSA, which we inevitably did. We were working on a plan to get roster data, to try to get the unions to reveal to us what the makeup of what the gender ratios in their rosters were. This was early. We still thought we could do it.
How did that go?
Not so well, though I did find a way to get it through the payroll companies, but we'll talk about that. We were working on optimizing studio and IA apprenticeship programs because there were a million different programs out there. We were trying to figure out like how to make them efficient and how to access them and how to get awareness about them out there. We were working on trying to get, Kristen was creating a Google form to organize the PSA candidate list. We were working on production supervisors, inclusion into the DGA, which was also a huge push that we did. And we actually got farther than anybody. We actually got into the room with the DGA and very, very angry man yelling at us about trying to get...
At the APTP, and it was brought up for the negotiation at the time, and we had a lot of support. Industry support.
We did, but the DGA just killed us.
The DGAs.
But we'll get there. We were scheduling meetings with various union BAs, business agents to 399, 600, 800, and we've created actually great relationships with a lot of those people, a lot of them whom are women, who shared our ideas about how to get women into these positions, but were just as stymied as we were about how to break through the union requirements. Oh, we have Julie Harris, the Other 50% podcast.
I thought this meeting sounded familiar.
Jeanette Volturno is sharing, Film Independent is interested in sharing lists and data with us. So she was working on that. We were doing training mentorship stuff. We were working on, Kristen was working on a website database, 50-50 by 2020. Focus on line producers as well as execs, trying to engage the IA and the DGA. We were working on harassment seminars.
And by the way, we would have hit 50-50 by 2020 if it was not a pandemic.
I know.
I thought we did in television.
That was directors. We were not there yet. Again, we were dealing behind the lens. We were hitting in that direction. Had the pandemic not happened, we would have been having a whole different conversation in 2022.
Yeah.
Right now at this podcast. We would have had more 50-50, and the pandemic rolled us all back. I think it just took us back a decade of work.
Agreed.
But out of that meeting, because that was March of 2019, morphed going even further, and that is where Dana and I got involved in the women's production group, which is something we're going to talk about later and re-amplify in a different way. But it's where we got women in these heads of position at labor unions, at heads of labor at major studios, some HODs, more below the line production executives, some film commissions, and got them together at that time to see, like, what are you doing? Like, let's find the entities out that we can unify on, like as an industry as a whole. So we decided,
it wasn't just film executives.
It wasn't just film or TV executives.
Women in leadership positions across the business.
Behind the camera. All the magicians behind the camera that were really kind of making it happen across the board. Which, by the way, when we had that first lunch, which was also at Paramount, and I think that was, what did we say that was, October of 2018? We had never sat across the table from each other before without a negotiation going on.
With the unions.
Yes, you didn't have like the head of 600 or 700 local with the head of Paramount Labor or Fox Labor with the head of production Paramount or this EVP of Fox production sitting down talking about commonalities that had never been done before. We always were on the opposite side of the table negotiating out union agreement. And so we decided, let's hear from everybody in that room of what's going on, what you're implementing, and what is it that you're focusing to make better within your pod. Everyone seems to use pod these days within your organization. And it was 3-hour meeting.
Again, it was amazing.
It was
Everybody
amazing.
was in it.
We got this, again, commonalities we had to hear, and there was the disconnecting, now connecting, and trying to create pipeline and streamline, because if you're going to do, when we talked about the PSA of this awareness campaign, it was like, great, let's let people know within the United States that these jobs exist behind the camera. It's not just a writer, actor, director, or producer. There's all these different jobs behind the camera. And we make people aware that they exist if you have an interest in it, but then we needed to pipeline it. So we needed to streamline. When you're in the audience, you realize the camera role exists. How is that individual going to get into that union so they can get that job? And that's where we needed the help of all our counterparts within the industry.
Well, it makes sense because across the industry, you're all using the same labor pool. You have to have standardized the way we all work so that
we also needed, like, I don't want to say moles, but we needed our counterparts within the unions, which are historically in this country one way, period. All unions.
Well, it's not their
Hollywood.
job to be open. It's their job to protect their, constituency.
And unions came from men being the providers back then, back in the day when they kind of birthed the union, especially the Teamsters. And you have, predominantly 90+% of the membership are of one gender. And
if the people representing them that you're talking to, even if they're with you, they need to be reelected by their base.
Yeah, true enough. So they have to be,
so
they have to be protected as well. So it's, they can't just affect change because they agree with us. They have to protect their membership. They have to protect their positions.
So when you look at, I think it was Hank Lockman told me this, that, the population of Los Angeles is really 20% white men. The population of production in Los Angeles is 80% white men.
That's interesting.
What happened?
Yeah.
Right. We also had heard back then the population of the world, women were 51% and men were 49% at that time. Yeah. And we were like, well, wait a minute, there's more women in the world. Why are we not at least going 50-50
go on about that
positions? Forever. But I'm just saying there's all this data, to your point of data, there was all this data that more educated women were getting into the workforce, and we were more than qualified to do these jobs. And because Hollywood would take chances on men doing these jobs when they had no rhyme or reason to do it, why didn't we give chances to women? And so,
and I think the thing with the unions is that by their very nature, they're closed, and all of our efforts have been about opening things up. Have been about opening up the business, opening up below the line, opening up jobs to women and everybody else.
And communication. And
so the unions are, they exist counter to that idea. And so all the work that we're all doing is to try to open up the unions, which is going to be very difficult.
So let's talk about kind of where we are in the world right now. Because all this momentum, everything moving forward so quickly, Trump, pandemic, Me Too, Black Lives Matter, George Floyd, war, everything happened all at once. Mm-hmm. So where does that put kind of the movement? Where do you think this group kind of sits in the context of all of that? And where are you kind of shifting your focus now?
I just want to launch into one thing. Pandemic, reawakening, transformation, pioneering. That's where we are.
Question everything.
Question everything. I mean, the whole point is coming out of a pandemic, we are right where we're supposed to be. We fell behind a little bit with the male to female ratio. We went to hibernation. And then, of course, what the industry does is they do what's more comfortable because they go into fear-based nature and they do what's more comfortable. And there's a lot of work out there and there's not enough people to do the job. But maybe now we can start grooming new people.
Well, we've all come to appreciate the nature of chaos and the opportunity that chaos creates a lot more than we used to, right? Because we're people who put order to chaos. But, if Trump and the current situation have taught any of us anything, chaos can be your friend. It's not my favorite thing to do, but I understand it better now. So I think we're able to kind of ride this wave of uncertainty and use the fact that there is no accepted foundation anymore, and we can create whatever we want.
And I think the industry as a whole doesn't know what it doesn't know coming out of this pandemic. And I think it positions us in a place that we can actually say, this is what we need now. We've been around for decades. We know what the industry needs. We know the kind of shows we're making, and we know how to cast it up properly. And we have the pool and the resources to do that more than ever because WPS has grown so much.
And how are you looking at it with the lens of intersectionality? There's a bit of backlash right now about the rise of white feminism, around the Me Too movement and all of that. Yeah. So how are you thinking about that now in this new context?
You know what? We did years ago, I think years ago in 2017, 18, at least I always talked about inclusivity. Diversity, I never really liked that word. I always liked inclusivity. I have an 11-year-old white boy that I am raising, and I want him to not be ignored when he gets older to become a person, in business or in his world. So we have to be inclusive. We need to make the entertainment business be reflective of the world we live in. And I think it's always been about inclusivity. I think we have a launching place as WPS to really lean more into that. And we have a lot of activists within our organization that have dovetailed it into more than just gender, but race, sex, ageism, which is a whole nother thing that we don't touch upon because there's such great people that can do the job, because we have to deal with ageism just as a collective. So I think it's just been in the DNA of the last 6 years anyway.
Yeah, and I think we did talk about, changing the mission statement, not that this is everything, but to be conscious of saying that we are promoting women of all kinds to positions of leadership in the film industry. And I think that's really important. There's a tendency to just say women because it's easier. But I think we're always conscious of it, but it's always good to be reminded of it and to probably kind of make that more outward facing.
Yeah. And when we did the PSA a few years ago, we intentionally did it. We kept the gender as women, but we did deal with age. We were intentional. We did color, intentional. Sex orientation, intentional. So we did a piece of the inclusivity, but we just kept it to the female gender.
Yes. Again, it has to do with being focused and intentional about what you can and can't do. Right?
Yeah, because if you're trying to affect change in a culture, it's easier to do it very isolated.
Yeah, because we have a particular area of expertise. And again, we talk about directors and DPs. Directors and DPs don't need my help.
Yeah, the DJ's got that covered.
Yeah, they don't need my help, but gaffers and gaffers and grips need my help. Teamsters need my help, musicians, but DPs and directors are fine. They don't need me. So that's part of what we're kind of coming from.
So now I know you've handed over the reins of the Women's Production Society over to Kristen Karsterby and to Jeanette Valturno. We're going to talk to them in a minute. So let's talk about what is next for the two of you. Where are you focusing this energy and drive and activism?
We're going to resurrect, the WPG, the Women's Production Group, which is always a terrible name, and which we need to come up with a new one.
You and the name.
I know. Well,
she doesn't like to label things. She wants to be a little loosey-goosey, which is
put it in a box.
I have problems with commitment, but words matter. Anyway, again, this kind of cross-section of influential women across the industry and, women behind the lens.
Behind the lens,
right? Women behind the lens.
Not below the line.
No. And we're going to resurrect that. The idea that there are all these disparate groups out there promoting underserved population and women and all that stuff. We want to kind of get everybody in a room, have a summit, for lack of a better word, and kind of get everybody in a room and, as Debra said, refresh and kind of rebirth this movement. We're coming up with an agenda, some themes. I think for me it's about creating a platform for what our expectations are. Get everybody in a room and say to the industry, this is what it needs to be, and this is what our expectations are, and this is what you need to do for us. And then we're also going to kind of refresh the PSA and relaunch that,
and also really take some of the negotiations that are coming out of the AMPTP and really kind of amplify them, like this workforce, this task workforce that exists, and use our labor execs and our union heads and really see how we can implement something that is existing right now, but no one's really kind of connecting the dots.
Several things came out of that last negotiation that are actually going to move us forward, but it's the getting people to implement them and put the committee together and do the work.
But we still can't get clarity. Like the AMPTP IA task force, which was negotiated in the last contract, kind of was a non-starter, and maybe it was because of COVID. Probably. But we could never get any clarity or any confirmation on what exactly it was going to do and who was going to do anything. And we asked that question a lot, and we got no clear answers. And we're getting kind of the same answer here. Like, we've gone to our diversity group person at the company we work for, and it's still been kind of like, we were like, okay, what's the mission? What's the agenda? And the agenda was, well, we're just all going to be better at inclusion and diversity.
No.
Exactly. Well, so Debra and I just decided, well, we're just going to do it.
The other thing is, we're like the connective tissue of behind the camera. There's a lot out there. There's the AMPTP we just talked about. There's the Film Commission that birthed out of Time's Up, that we don't know what they're doing. They're supposed to affect legislation. So there's been so much disconnect and so many people rowing in different direction. I think this next summit or birth or coalition that
we're still working on it
is going to be more connectivity in the industry.
Yeah.
As we've moved forward.
Yep.
Because we've moved forward from a lot of places. And that's our next mission. Our next mission is to not only take female production execs within the industry, but go in the industry and just do what we do magnificently in the industry.
I love it. Count me in. Every studio has their own thing of random acts of diversity, and we need to pull it all together and viva la revolution.
Yeah.
Viva la revolution. Viva la revolution. That's my French-Italian combo.
Spanish.
I think the Italian in there.
Well, go revolution.
Go revolution.
Okay, thank you. This has been the Catch a Break podcast. I'm Julie Harris Oliver. Thank you to Dana Belcastro and Debra Bergman for sharing the story of the Women's Production Society. If you want to learn more, you can visit their website at www.womensproductionsociety.org. Please check out our website at catchabreakpodcast.com and follow us on all the social media. Catch a Break is produced in partnership with Catchlight Films and The Other 50% and is sponsored by Groovy, reinventing the playing field in entertainment worldwide. Find them at crevie.com. Our theme music, Mantra for a Struggling Artist, was composed by Andrew Jocelyn. Check back soon for part 2 of this series on the Women's Production Society, where I interview the new leadership of the group, Jeanette Volturno and Kristen Karstrupi. Thanks for listening. See you next time.